All right, let's do it. A typical episode begins right now. All right, let's do it. We're just gonna kick in to high gear and hit the ground running here. How's it going? How are you? How was your day? How was your day, Owen? It was good. Got any cool, funny anecdotes about your life? Not really. I kind of think we should hit the ground running. All right, cool. That's awesome. Thanks. So, obviously you can notice it's not a live episode. We've pretty rarely done that, maybe like once or twice. I think last year I did the video game controller episode, not live, which people thought was cool actually. Thanks. But I'm doing this because it's Tuesday when you're watching this, presumably. Maybe later, but it's earliest Tuesday. And I had to take Owen Jr., little nascent protege, still cooking in the womb. Had to take him to the nearest city to get little check out his organs and that whole situation. He's fine. Thanks for asking. I'm sure you're genuinely concerned, but he's cool. He's chilling. But that's why I'm not here on Tuesday night being live with you. So I was thinking, what are we going to do? I set up the camera. I set up the stuff. I was thinking about it for like 2 to 3 days in the back of my mind, lying awake in bed at 1 a.m. What am I going to do for the pre-recorded episode? And I had some ideas, drawing, painting, of course, things we've done before, but we've been tiptoeing around a certain aspect of the show. The show has many different aspects. One of those is the meta creative aspect, getting other people to be creative, a window into the creative process. And we've been tiptoeing around, we should do some instructional drawing stuff. We should do some instructional stuff like people learning to draw, learning to get... We've talked about it so much, probably since the start of the show. And I thought that we should just break off a little tiny piece of it and get going. That is a sort of meta creative note there in and of itself. Oftentimes when you're working on a project, you start to plan it to be too big. You start to think, oh my God, well, episode 60, 61 will have a 32-part, multiple year length, and it gets to be so big, and then you just never do it. So it's easier to just break off a tiny piece in the beginning and just get going, and that's what we're going to do right now. And I was thinking, learning to draw, it's quite a big topic. I think I do have a pretty good grip on the fundamentals. I've studied drawing in a few different contexts, everything from we're going to set up a bunch of fruit and you're going to paint these fruit and draw them with charcoal for weeks at a time, getting every little detail perfect, to more modern illustration stuff. I've kind of been around, not it all, but I've been around a variety of the spectrum. And I have a few ideas for things we can do, hitting still life stuff, classical drawing, sketching, all of that. And I was thinking, what's the first square one for people to really step in to the pond? Because if I start out, let's do a tutorial on lighting, how light works, form, and I got the charcoal, and I got the newsprint, and I got the classical setup, which I think we're going to do eventually. I'm actually kind of amped about it, in case you can't tell. But what's the square one? I was thinking, what's something people could actually do? And I couldn't stop thinking about the sketchbook and notebook aspect of things. The thing is, this is the lowest barrier of entry possible into visual art, being creative, visually thinking, visually, the way visual stuff ties to thinking and kind of building your own little labyrinth and path through the whole informational visual world. The notebook and sketchbook really, is the lowest barrier of entry, and also it's one of the things you get the most mileage out of. So I thought we could take, probably not too long because I am going to set out to take Owen Jr. very soon, but I thought that would be a good place to start, because no matter who you are, even if you're, watching the show, you have like $5 in your bank account, you probably have some paper. You could even go to like a Walmart or something, and Walmart's a perfect example. They have sketchbooks there. You could spend like $6, maybe like $5 even, and leave and have everything you need to get going. So that's what we're going to do right now. We hit a few kind of tutorial material episodes. I did watercolor pencils, and a few people hit me up and were like, oh, I got the watercolor pencils. I started working with them. That's awesome, but this is the lowest barrier of entry. And also I think it's something you kind of need to do to advance your own or get going your own creative visual process. And we're just going to run through. Boom, 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 boom. I got a few bullet points I want to hit, and then we're going to open some of these notebooks. Number one. By the way, you like the natural lighting? I got the window open. Normally we record at night, so the lighting's a little bit different. Just thought I'd mention it. Number one. Am I going to write it? Sometimes I like to write while I'm talking. Is why. Why, Owen? Why would I keep a sketchbook? Maybe I'm not an artist. I'm just some random guy who has stumbled into the painting show. Why would I do that? Well, I think that there's sort of a, I don't want to say misconception, but there's this idea that like the arts are kind of fractured, that, you know, if you do visual art, you're like a visual artist. Maybe you play guitar because you're a musician. And I tried to think of a really good tangible example of that. And I was thinking of Da Vinci, Leonardo da Vinci. He has this letter that's kind of well known if you go into like high Renaissance studies and poke into the Renaissance. It's this letter he wrote, I think it's to a prince from a neighboring city-state, someone that could set him up, you know, patronage-wise, or he wanted to work for him or something like that. And the letter basically says, hey, you know, I don't know if you've heard of me. I'm Leonardo da Vinci, and here's all the things I'm good at. I've studied bridge building, and I know about building bridges, and I studied metallurgy. I know about metals and working with metals. I know about architecture. I learned about architecture, so I know about all these different ways of building buildings, and I know about natural studies. I know about biology, and I've studied these animals in these contexts. And it goes through everything that he's good at, and then at the very end, on like, it's almost like the last line, it says, yeah, also, by the way, I can draw and paint as good as anyone else, by the way. I just thought I'd mention it. And I thought that was a perfect example because for him, we think of him as a visual artist, but actually going into the visual aspect of the world was just one piece of his I'm becoming a genius model for his life. I'm going to understand the universe, and a small piece of that is understanding drawing, painting, how light works, how things look, the visual form and architecture of the universe. And I thought that was a pretty good just example for why, because no matter who you are, no matter what you do, even if you don't do anything creative at this moment, it's a nice little foothold. Drawing is a nice little foothold into understanding. You know, there's a theological dimension to the show, a spiritual dimension of the show, how God made the universe, honestly. I think that my own appreciation for the natural world has been deepened like 10,000%. I mean, that's an understatement, honestly. It's been deepened an infinite amount, an unquantifiable amount, just by looking deeply at things. And that would be the sub-reason as for why we'll call it looking deeply. We're not going to do notes. I didn't really plan on this, but as long as I got the visual up, looking deeply at things. Because looking at things, humans are really visual creatures. We've talked about this on the show a little bit also. But I would pin it down a little bit more and say we actually think visually. We tend to think that we think in pure informational terms, but I think a lot of that information is visual. I say this all the time on the show, but it's reflected in our language. All of our thought metaphors usually are visual, like do you see what I'm saying? Is it clear? Things like that. Is what I'm saying clear to you? You know, do you see what I'm saying? It's visual, right? Because I think that the visual aspect of life, we're visual creatures basically, is intimately tied to how we see the world. And when you're drawing, you'll see when we open up some of these notebooks, it allows you to kind of go deeper into seeing how things really are. We'll go into it a little bit later, maybe not this episode even, but a big part of drawing is seeing things as they are and not how you think that you're seeing them. So we will go into this when we do like a full intro to drawing, but this is one of my favorite things to show people. Well, let's do it this way. So kids in general like drawing. Pretty much all kids enjoy drawing. And most people drew at some point in their lives. But people's visual development, their drawing skills, kind of usually stalls at a certain point. And maybe you can remember a time when you were drawing. A little kid, maybe you enjoyed drawing like tanks, or maybe you don't even really remember, but you have some vague memories of having crayons in like a classroom or something. But a lot of adults can look back, especially if this is explained to them, and feel, oh yeah, I stopped at that point, and that's where my wall is, and I never kept going. People often look at others who are good at drawing as though it's kind of magical, especially realistic drawing really gets people that, wow, you really drew that hand and got the shadows. It's almost like magical, and I think that this is the reason why. So very, very little kids start in what I would call like a kinetic drawing stage. If you work with really, really, really little kids, I know the light's kind of intense and blue. It's kind of cool though, right? I kind of like it. We usually don't have the daylight, but it's nice with the glove and the blue and the auto white balance of the camera. So I thought I'd mention that I do enjoy the aesthetic of the visual right now. Anyway, so kids usually start in a kinetic drawing stage. What I mean by that is if you take a little kid and give them some markers or crayons or something like that, or if you enjoy having your house and environment destroyed, paint or something like that, they'll take it and it's just the kinetic aspect of the tool. Kinetic meaning like the physical, actionable experience of it. So they'll take the marker and they'll just be like, basically they won't say this, but they'll be like, wow, this is crazy. Markers, wow. And it's just the action of doing it that is really, really cool for them. And if you take a really little kid and have them do something like this and you ask them what they're drawing or something, they won't even understand the question that you're asking them. They'll say what are you talking about? The connection between I'm doing this thing. It's kind of like if you give a kid like a drum or something. They're just banging the drum, but if you ask them, what are you playing a song about? It's a nonsensical question. They're just like, wow, color is crazy. Drawing is crazy. It's good to know that way in the back of your mind somewhere there is that, experience that you can tap into doing visual stuff, because that is legitimate. Drawing is crazy. I mean, I could just sit here and be like, wow, I'm really literally marking up this paper. That's so cool. But we're going to keep moving on. After that, they start to step into a kind of like faux representational space. Rudolf Steiner designed this thing called Waldorf School, and I didn't go to Waldorf School, but one of the ideas that he used in there, it's actually someone else's idea. It's called ontology recapitulates phylogeny. The idea is that sounds really complicated. You sound really smart if you drop that casually on someone. But the idea is basically that an organism, as it develops, recapitulates. That means like retells or re-goes through the stages of its species as a whole. I'm pretty sure the guy that came up with that idea was talking about human embryos in like a Darwinian sense. He was like a Darwinian evolution person. And he was saying, well, if you look at the embryo, first it's in like this nascent stage. It's almost kind of like, I'm going to dumb it down quite a bit right now. It's almost kind of like an amphibian or something. And then it gets these little nubs. It's almost kind of like in a reptilian stage. And then later, it gets closer to being a mammal, but it still has a tail because as we evolved, we went through these stages. And then eventually, we get the normal baby. And he was saying, look, if you look at the development of the fetus, it recapitulates the story of the Darwinian evolution of this organism as a whole. We're officially agnostic about this process, but it's interesting to think about. And I think that whether or not that's true, it does definitely happen for kids developing through their life. They kind of go through the stages of civilizationally the species as a whole. And I'm telling you that because I think the stage after this, and by the way, early cave drawings, the earliest like drawings and etchings and marks and stuff we have, it's literally just mark making. If you go back to any culture and try and find the oldest material culture things, it'll often be like a bone or something with just some notches in it, or a cave where someone's carved just some random stuff. Maybe it meant something, but it has a kinetic aspect to it, basically. After that, the kids enter kind of like a symbolic stage, I guess. Like, you'll find a kid and he'll be drawing something like this and you're like, what's that? And he's like, it's my dog. And yeah, okay, I get it. Like it has the legs or something. All right. And maybe they get a little better and they're like, yeah, here's a tree. Like I'm now getting advanced enough to perceive that there's this shape to the tree and I'm representing the tree, And then after that, they get to the stage that everyone thinks of when they think of kids' drawings. There is a point to this. The next stage is like, the unintuitive leap. But they get to the stage where people think of kids' drawings where it's the house and everything's kind of the same size. Here's my dad and here's my mom. Maybe they understand that they're smaller actually. And here's the sun and there's a cloud because it was cloudy on that day that we went to the park. And here's a tree and here's my dog also, by the way. So that's kind of the stage people think of for kids' drawings. I mentioned the whole recapitulation of civilization stuff because early art usually is kind of in this like two-dimensional symbolic ideo-visual framework. We could go into that. It's pretty interesting. And you probably remember doing some stuff like that. But here's the kicker. Kids get to be around 10, 11, 12 years old. And now they're smart enough to realize This is the gap where people stop drawing. And this is pretty well documented in educational art stuff, let's say. They get to the stage where they're smart enough to realize that this is not what it actually looks like. They're smart enough to say, my dad doesn't look like this. This is a great drawing. My dad doesn't look like that. That's not what he looks like. When I look at him, he doesn't look like that. But they're not advanced enough, or you could say no one's teaching them how to take it to the next step where it actually will look like his dad, you know? I'm not going to draw it accurately, but you can imagine a realistic drawing of the dad. And they hit this stage and they start getting really, really frustrated. And if you look at people's drawings, kids' drawings, especially from around this stage, normally what you find, let's pretend this page is blank, is that it's lots of little tiny things, and they're trying as hard as possible to make it look real. So if you look at a 10 to 12-year-old's drawing sometimes, if you have a kid, this might be very interesting for you. What you'll see sometimes is they're like, okay, ice cream. I know what ice cream cones look like. And you'll get lots of like, I don't want to say fussy, but they're almost trying to get all the details in like an intellectual way. So a kid is like, yeah, when I have an ice cream cone, it has the marks on it. That's how an ice cream cone is. And maybe it drips sometimes. And you know, what's another good example? An eye is a really good example. People draw eyes all the time when they're sketching. And they'll say, yeah, I know what an eye is like. It has this tear duct, and then it comes up here, and it comes down here, and there's the dark part, I know that, and there's the other part, and then there's an eyebrow. Okay, and then maybe they even get advanced enough to say, you know, it's dark in here, I guess. It's like dark sometimes. Like maybe they can look at someone's eye and say, okay, that's kind of what it looks like. Or their dog, and they'll go over, my point is that they'll go over every detail, like, yeah, my dog has these ears, and then my dog has 2 eyes, and he has a nose, and they're in this framework of like, if I can just get all the details in, that's how I'll make it look real, and then it'll look real, and then it'll look good. Kids in this stage also start being very, very concerned about if their drawings are good or not. In fact, in a lot of educational literature, it tells you specifically never to ask the kid if the drawing's good or not, or to say, wow, that's really good, because they're like getting obsessed and getting really frustrated. Anyway, you can imagine, this is kind of a perfect example. So the kid is smart enough to know, this doesn't actually look like an ice cream cone, but I put all the details in. Why doesn't it look like an ice cream cone? And they get really frustrated, and maybe they see other kids are a little better than them, or they can see real art, and they're like, well, my art doesn't look like real art, and then they stop drawing. So you get a situation where maybe 7-year-olds, everyone's drawing, almost like 100% of people, and then let's say you get to 13, now everyone's stopped. You can probably observe that in your own life, or just observe that if you imagine being around little kids, and that's why. They hit this wall of, I can't make it look real, I'm just not good at this, and then they stop. And part of the reason for that, we're going a little bit off track with the sketchbook stuff, but I think this is really interesting, because I wanted to hit this example. Most people never understand what I'm about to show you right now, and this is kind of like the unintuitive leap that drawing a lot and engaging visually, this is the unintuitive leap that I think usually someone has to push you over. Someone has to show you this, and then you're like, oh, that's why. So I'm going to tell you right now. Let's say you're going to draw a dice. Let's say you're a die. I'm going to say dice because die sounds pretentious and confusing. You're drawing a table, and there's dice on the table, and you're like, okay, let's put yourself really in the mind of like an 11-year-old kid, 10-year-old maybe. Or maybe you draw this way now, which is fine. You're like, okay, I'm going to draw a die. Well, I know, one thing I know for sure is that baby is square, okay? But when you're looking at it, you can see other sides of the dice. So is it like this? No, that's wrong. This is wrong. That's not what they look like. Okay. Well, I know it's squares, so is it like this? And you can see you can't see the bottom. This isn't right either. Okay. Well, maybe you look at enough drawings where you say, oh, I get it. Maybe it's like this, but that's not how it looks either. And they're reasoning for it, and they say, well, look, I know a dice is square. It's all right angles. Why can't I make this look right? Or maybe it's a cup. They say the opening of the cup is a circle, but that's not how, and the bottom's flat. This is a better example, actually. The top of the cup is a circle. I drink out of cups all day. The bottom's flat, but this isn't how cups look. Why can't I make this work? And the answer is that even though it's true that a cube, is all right angles and all these angular lines, the paradox is that when you look at a die, some people know how to draw cubes, this might not be that shocking for people, but when you look at a cube, there's actually no right angles, right? Most people have learned how to draw a cube this way, but maybe you never thought about it. There's no right angles in this picture. This isn't a right angle, this isn't a right angle, this isn't a right angle. And these aren't squares. That shape that I just drew is actually a diamond. But die, when you hold them in your hand, don't have diamonds. They're all squares. What the heck? And that is the unintuitive leap. When you're looking at stuff, what you think that you know about it is blocking what you're actually seeing. This is actually a better example that I just came up with. Although this is perfect, this works here. But this is a better example. When you're looking at a cup, you know, and little kids will literally draw cups this way, by the way. You know that the top is a circle, and that the bottom is flat. But that's not what cups look like. And sometimes kids are like, oh, well, it looks like this. The top is flat, and the bottom's flat. But that's not what a cup looks like. To draw a cup, the way I'm actually seeing a cup right over here off the side, you have to draw an oval. But if you think about it, maybe you've never thought about this before, there's no ovals on the cup. It's actually a circle. But when you see it, it's an oval. So you have to bridge this wall where your brain, perfect example, your brain is telling you, dude, the cup top is a circle. But your eyes are seeing an oval. And a lot of people completely and totally visually live in this world. Maybe this is kind of obvious for you because you're smart enough, maybe you're probably an adult, and you're saying, well, yeah, I know when you see a cube, it's not right angles, like duh. But everyone has, unless you've intentionally broken all that down, everyone has these symbols where your brain is telling you, I know what that looks like. We're good. Don't even worry about it, man. But your eyes are saying, actually, I'm seeing it totally differently. And bridging this gap or overriding it or really interacting with this gap is what the practice of drawing is really all about. I'll give you a personal example from myself. So when I first started drawing, you start drawing a lot of people and a lot of faces and stuff. And I got pretty good at it or whatever. But one thing that I was doing, probably before I even got to like the 3D kind of stage, is I really thought people's ears were this shape, I guess. And every time I started drawing people's ears, let's go back to like 12-year-old Owen trying to make it work over here. And I put this indent in them. And of course now, we're looking at this, we know that ears aren't that shape, obviously. But I had this moment where I was looking at a picture of someone and I finally noticed that there's no indent here. And I really had this like total epiphany where I was like, wow, my brain is telling me to put this in here, but it's not here. People have that with eyes too. A lot of times little kids especially will always draw eyes like this because they know, well, there's a top opening, there's a bottom opening. But if you actually look at a person's eyes, normally it's not like that. Normally it's almost more like this, and it's not straight up and down. It's a little bit more of an angle and stuff like that. So we'll go into that a little bit more another time, but I thought it was worth laying that out. You got to let your eyes tell you what they're seeing and bypass what your brain is telling you. And maybe that's kind of obvious. Maybe like you're like, I don't really get it. But if you start drawing, you'll definitely see what I mean. There will be times where your brain is saying, we know what that looks like. Draw it like this. But your eye, if you actually tune in to what you're literally seeing in front of you, will do it differently. It happens a little bit more with painting. Maybe painting's a good example too, because if you step outside and you want to paint the grass, your brain can tell you, yeah, we know grass is green. We're good to go, man. But if you come out in the morning, the grass is almost more like blue in the blue light. Maybe at nighttime, it's really dark and the grass will actually almost be like gray because it's so dark that you actually can't even really see the green color of it. So you know that it's green, but you're actually seeing maybe a gold color or a gray color. So you can imagine that also. So anyway, I just thought I should cover that. But let's jump in a little bit to sketchbook, because the other aspect of a sketchbook, so maybe like 10 more minutes here. Just want to hit a few other things because I actually want you to do it. You should do it. This is like a homework assignment for you. Homework from the show. So one thing, I was thinking actually practicality, carrying around a sketchbook. Just quickly going to note that. So if you have a book like this is from like 10 years ago, so I did put these stickers on it and got hit by a car actually. Maybe I'll tell you guys that story. So it looks kind of crazy here. But if you have a book with these spiral bound sides, it looks like a sketchbook and people are going to ask you about it. So, you know, that's kind of annoying, to be totally honest with you, because everywhere you go, people are like, oh, is that a sketchbook? Oh, you're an artist? I didn't know that. And then you have to say, well, not really. My friend just said it might be beneficial intellectually to keep a sketchbook, so I'm kind of just trying it out. And then they say, well, can we look inside? And then maybe you want to say, oh, not really. They're not really good. And then they say, oh, come on, let us look inside. And then everywhere you go, people are looking inside all the time. Happens all the time. So I don't really get the spiral ones ever. I also think eventually the spirals kind of like warp and it becomes difficult to open. That's just my style. Maybe you like the spiral ones. But I like ones like this. You can see this actually kind of just looks like a normal book. They do make sketchbooks like this. And when I carry it around, I have another book with me. So I have whatever book I'm reading and then I have the sketchbook with it together. And I think it kind of like deflects people a little bit. I don't know if I did this intentionally in the beginning or if it just kind of started happening that way. But it draws a lot less attention to it because people see you carrying a normal book and the sketchbook and they're just like, oh, Owen has two books, you know, whatever. And if they ask about it, you can say, yeah, I'm taking notes on like this thing I'm reading or whatever. So it kind of just takes the pressure off a little bit. I thought that would be worth mentioning in case I'm actually encouraging people to dive into sketchbooking. And this notebook, I'm going to bring the camera down while I'm talking right now. I want to show you a few examples of what I mean when I talk about visually investigating the world around you. Because maybe you've never seen someone's sketchbook before. It's not a huge deal. I think I've maybe posted pictures of this one on Twitter once or twice or something. I just want to make sure we really get in here, so, you know, if we're going to bother opening this book up. And let me just make sure it's focused as well as it can be while I'm talking. Because I think that this is really like a visual learning thing, because I can tell you like, yeah, walk around or just draw the stuff around you. But I think without seeing it, it's a little bit like, what do you mean? Like, I don't really know how that's going to work out. Okay, perfect. I'm just making sure it's focused before I open this, as long as we're going to bother going in here. I manually focus the camera now. I don't know, the autofocus is just horrible. We did a few episodes way in the beginning where people would DM me and say, hey, this was great, but the whole thing was just like a little out of focus. Okay, so I'm trying to think where to start here, just because it's kind of like a big topic. We could just open it up, or we could do a little drawing beforehand. I think that what would be the most beneficial is to let's just dive in here. Let's just go in here. So this sketchbook is from when I was in Bulgaria. I was in Bulgaria for a minute, and I think that the most beneficial thing if you're learning to draw, we'll probably look in here and draw also, is just you're going to need a pen. You might think pencil, but pencil's for drawing. I'm drawing. Don't I need a pencil? No, you're using a pen for sure. And even a cheap pen, this is not really a cheap pen, but it's like a normal pen. Anything that's not like a ballpoint pen. Because a ballpoint pen is, you might learn a new term right now, it's pressure sensitive. So if I press lightly, I get these nice light airy lines, and if I press hard, I get these definitive hard lines. So it's pressure sensitive. Most pens are going to be pressure sensitive in terms of size, but you don't want them to be pressure sensitive in terms of opacity, right? In terms of how transparent or not transparent it is. You want a pen like this one, where no matter how lightly you touch, no matter what happens, it's always going to be 100% blackness. And the reason for this is because there's two things that this practice is meant to develop in terms of learning to draw. There's a lot of other things going on that we'll probably talk about another time, but in terms of learning to draw, there's two things going on here. Obviously you can deduce the world around you is not literally black and white. So by using a tool that only operates in black and white, it forces you to start thinking about how you're going to translate visual information into a medium, that being black and white. So what do I mean by that? Let's say I'm drawing my nightstand. I draw random stuff around my house sometimes. So I'm drawing my nightstand, right? So I'm like, okay, let's say I'm just doing a really, really quick sketch. I'm like, okay, it's kind of like this, you know. And this part comes down here. Got my little nightstand going on and the table. This is a really loose drawing, obviously. Okay, but the lamp is on, right? So the reason I want you using a pen is because with a pressure-sensitive pen, you can come in and say, okay, well, it's a little bit lighter here, and then it gets a little bit darker, Okay, and you can kind of try and do like shading with it. That's cool. I mean, you can do whatever you want. It's your sketchbook. But I think when you're first getting going, something that's going to help you a lot, something that might not be intuitive, you can come in and say, okay, well, I'm going to try and shade this and make it look like it actually does. And there is some advantage to trying to capture things as they are, to try and draw things realistically. But the thing is, this isn't going to develop confidence in terms of line making. Confidence is one of the things that keeping a sketchbook is meant to develop in your drawing practice. Pretty much, this is a hard rule that you can take away from me. Maybe it's my opinion, but I think it's a fact. Any piece of art that you respond to positively, any piece of art that you look at and you're like, wow, there's something there, boom. I think one aspect of what you're responding to is the confidence that the artist is showing forth to you. For example, I saw this picture recently. It's a perfect example. Someone did a landscape, and they painted this landscape, and it's just like boom, just like wet paint spilling out, and it makes the sky, and then the wet paint, it's like watercolor spilling out that makes the beach, and there's little birds in the sky and stuff like that. Maybe there's like a dead tree over here in the front, and there's this sailboat, and for the sailboat you can see that he just took the paintbrush and went and just made it's just a little white bam dash, but it really looks like a sailboat. And you see it and you're like, wow, that's so good. It's so, frankly, like badass that he just took the brush and that's the sailboat. And you can feel that confidence and power come through in the confident mark making. You feel like he was like, oh yeah, I've done this literally 1,000 times. Boom, and it's perfect. Whereas you can imagine if someone came in and they're like, oh, well, it's a little, maybe it's just a little, maybe it's like this, and then I gotta get the little. It doesn't have the same effect. That could be good too, whatever, but I'm making a point here. There's something about the confidence in the mark making that people really respond to and that you want to develop that will always serve you no matter what you're doing elsewhere. So back to our lamp analogy, you can kind of feel here, I just did this while I was talking, obviously, but you can kind of feel, like if you had to verbalize it, you can feel, it's kind of like when I was talking to you. It's like, oh, well, maybe it's a little dark over here, and maybe it's a little, okay, and you can make this look good. I'm not saying you can't, but it's totally different if you have a pen like this and you have to say, all right, well, I guess I'm going to do it like this. Boom. That's how it is. Okay. And maybe the shadow, maybe I'll just make it totally black. Boom. Okay, and these slots, they're kind of faded, but I have to decide, what am I going to do? I'll just throw in the slots. Boom. And you're forced to make a decision and follow through with it, and you can't change it. And when you draw like that a lot, it will develop confidence in your drawing. So that's part of why I would say you should use a pen. Okay, let's look at some examples. Boom. So I kept this book when I was in Bulgaria, and I was going through my sketchbooks upstairs. I literally have like 20, man. I have like a ton up there from my whole life almost. But I thought this was a really good example because, like I said, I wanted this episode to be like, wow, anyone could do this no matter where you are, what you're doing. And when I went to Bulgaria, I was kind of trapped in this like house in the middle of nowhere, just kind of doing nothing all the time. I loved it. I had a great time. And I was drawing a lot. And this sketchbook is really a perfect example of that. So you can see, this is a perfect example of what I mean when I was saying before, just drawing the stuff around you. Okay? There was a baby there. I was just drawing the baby. I'd never been around a baby before. You can see I'm kind of trying to figure out, how do I draw a baby, man? This is weird. Up here, I think this drawing is pretty cool, actually. You can see it's all like shaded in and stuff. Wine glass over here. And I thought this would be a perfect example. I think we might flip through this whole thing. It's actually a pretty good body of work sketched out. So you can see, just feeling out how it is. This drawing's pretty good up here. We call these shadow shapes. I'm just going to like drop terms on you as you go along. We call these shadow shapes. So you can see I'm trying to feel out the shadow shapes on the baby. How do I draw the eye? How is its head? You're kind of feeling out the form. It's almost like your pen is the way of poking in and saying, how does this feel over here? How does this shape go over here? There's a little color in this one. Whatever, you can use color in your sketchbook if you want. You can see just literally stuff around me. There were these tulips in this house. There was a jar of change, lighters, just random stuff around me. scenes around your life. So no matter where you live, you can walk around and probably find something visually interesting. Or the thing is, actually, even if it's not visually interesting, you can try and see what is visually interesting about it. So here, for example, there were like these brick walls and rock walls that were really raw. So I really liked the texture of them. And I saw these weird trees. And you can literally see. I don't need to explain it, but stuff on tables, stuff around me. So over here, I was in this like house with just stuff around. But I thought this was a really good example of like no matter what's going on around you, you can find something interesting visually about it. So here, my friend had this cat. I was staying with him, and here he's like fixing this oven up, walking with the kid. Some of it's just like squiggles because you're trying to just feel it out, basically. It doesn't have to be like finished works of art and things like that. Here you can see again, feeling out like, oh, they had this toddler, like how's its head like fit on its body, like, how does it go? Also kind of feeling out my own drawing style. You can see I'm already kind of gravitating towards like simplifying forms and things like that. Maybe that's not how your drawing style is, not a big deal. And I think that thinking about things in terms of light and dark also helps. We'll do like a light and dark line drawing episode, but I just want to set you up here so by the time this episode is over, you feel empowered to go for it. And even just little stuff, like here I have this woman, she's holding like a cat, right? But you can see I drew in these bricks in the background, kind of lighter, so it feels like they're further in the distance. It's little things like that you build up over time. I really like this drawing a lot. This is my friend, he's playing Xbox. And you can see again, I'm kind of feeling my own like visual style out. Like I'm feeling it. This was probably like 10 years ago, just for the record. But like there's these folds on his pants. And I mentioned, I have this tool where I can't literally perfectly render the folds on the pants. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to see what it feels like to have this like high energy drawing it up. You can see even the controller lines, it kind of bleeds into his arm. And you kind of just get that happening naturally. It's not like I was sitting there like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I just, you feel it out and you get momentum. Momentum is really the perfect word. Woman holding her daughter in a chair. The book is kind of like where you get momentum in your practice, basically. These are really cool, actually. I like these. And I kind of gravitate towards the style of like packing things together. Sometimes we'll see in some of the other books. We have like 10 minutes left, probably. Sometimes I do have like an arrangement and composition on a page. But you can also just pack stuff in. There's an aspect of this we haven't talked about yet, which is getting ideas. But Van Gogh, a really good quote he had that's very relevant for this is he said, sketches are like the seeds that you plant to later harvest as paintings. So you can see also this is kind of like an idea incubator. For example, they had this dog and the dog was always laying on the floor like this. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we had the dog's shape and then that was like a window and then stuff is going on in there. If you watch the show, that's a big part of my drawing style is having spaces be windows. And I definitely think that developed from the sketchbook, from packing things together. I don't know what any of this says because I don't speak Bulgarian. I probably just copied it off signs when I was there. Here's my friend cooking, through the dog, just kind of like incubating weird ideas and things like that. I really love this drawing. It really encapsulates my time there perfectly because they just had this baby and we were playing Xbox and like taking care of the baby. It's like a really special drawing for me. I know it's not probably like incredible or something, but I think it's really cool. And you can see, again, the shadow shapes. That's what we call these, like feeling out, blocking it out, and stuff like that. But maybe your drawing style is totally different. Maybe you do it in a different way. And just random stuff around the house. You don't have to be in like Paris or something, sketching on like some epic ancient buildings or whatever. It could just, like, this is pretty cool. This is a pretty cool little image over here, the cup. I'm looking down at the cup. You can kind of just find interesting stuff wherever you are. Someone smoking weed. This is like 10 years ago. This is actually, honestly, I hate this because it's a really good drawing, but I really hate that I was a stoner for so long. But if we could table that just for a second, it actually is a really good drawing. And the way it's cut off here, the composition. So yeah, we're gonna move on, but yeah. And you can see just random stuff floating around. I just felt like seeing this would somehow maybe empower someone to feel like, oh yeah, I could do that, or like I could, get it going. And this is it was like 10 years ago, but I'm already like 5 or 6 years deep in drawing here. But one thing I will say is that if you do decide to pick it up, you see feeling it out, what's a baby's eye like and stuff like that. One thing I can guarantee is that you can get good enough to impress other people. Just, being honest, we're all limited by certain factors. Maybe you're not going to become, the best artist of all time. but you can get to a point where you can impress other people. You can definitely get to a point where people will look at your stuff and say, wow, you did that? It's pretty good. That's a really, really good feeling. Woman in the park, like, oh, she has this like babushka headdress on. Like, what's the deal with that? Random buildings. What's like the texture of the buildings when I look out these windows, broken fences and stuff. Or here you can see, we didn't talk about composition too much, but sometimes the whole page is the frame and then you're working in the frame. This is a really good picture. You know, I could take this and take a picture of it, put it in Photoshop, and I could do something with this today even. There were a lot of these like ridges of houses and then like things jutting out of them. So again, no matter where you are, there's something interesting visually around you. Chickens, let's fast forward through this a little bit. Cats, stuff like that. Cats, very exciting. A little bit of the color notes. That's really what the colors were like, honestly, in Bulgaria. This is, you know, sometimes you'll get little visual instances where you're like, oh, that's good. Here, my friend was standing through this window in the living room, and it was actually framed like this, and something about how red his coat was and the way he was standing with these gray, brown stuff behind him, I thought it was perfect. And I was like, yo, that's dope. I'm going to use that for something. I never did, but save little visual imagery here, more baby stuff. And this kind of just basically the deal. And sometimes you get really good like moments. Like, I really love this drawing. And honestly, this is exactly what my friend's wife looks like. She really, maybe it's not that extreme, but I really captured her vibe here. Honestly, I really did. And I was really like proud of that at the time. Just more baby stuff, more random stuff. Chickens, he had chickens, just feeling out, you know, how do I draw a chicken? And it all snowballs over time. And then you start making other pictures and things like that. More weed stuff and the baby. Sorry, it was like 10 years ago. We weren't doing drugs around the baby. They were in like another house. It's kind of a long story. Drinking a lot. This was my life like 10 years ago. I didn't really anticipate that aspect of it, but it kind of does go to show that no matter where you are, what you're doing, you can capture interesting visual things, even if you're just in kind of like a dirty house, you know, mugs and books and all that stuff floating around. We'll change the channel in a second. Drinking, playing cards. That was basically what I did when I was there. This is kind of a cool drawing. And you start to notice like little things, like you're like, oh, I can just end the table. I don't need to draw in the whole table. I can imply like the lighting and the cup and everything. So, yeah. Okay, we'll change the channel here right now. Anything else we should make sure we hit in here? No, we're good. But I thought that was honestly the best example. I considered just hitting this one because I just felt like, I know I'm repeating myself, but I really feel like it goes to show that you can just make little visual observations about things around you, and you'll start to like surprise yourself and impress yourself. Even this, the way things are rendered, this is pretty cool. Okay, we gotta change it. We gotta change the channel, but I can't stop. I'm intrigued myself. I myself am curious what else is in here. Okay, we're gonna keep it moving though. Some of these are good. Man. See, here, I'm not immune to what I described before. You can see like trying to fill it in, trying to make it happen. Okay. Oh, this is good too. We were playing cards and I was looking down at the table and I had this stack of cards and I was like, oh, that's a good visual scene. Okay, we gotta keep it moving though. We gotta keep going. Little things like nature. Look, I can't stop. I literally can't turn away from my own drawings. Little things from nature. You might notice little like, oh, it's a cool flower. Like, let me dive in there and see how it's actually like put together and stuff. So yeah. Okay, we're changing the channel now. This is a good sketchbook. Honestly, I thought about just hitting this one and not hitting any of the other ones. This is good though. Feeling like the texture of the house. And you could see how this could become a drawing later or just, you know, become its own thing. It doesn't have to be serving some like later purpose or whatever. Okay, let's end on that note. That's a really good one right there. Baby in the backseat. Solid. Okay. I feel like that was honestly a pretty good note. Okay, we'll hit one more thing just because I kind of hyped it up a little bit. And then we're going to wrap this up. I'm just going to raise the camera here. I'm going to raise it a little bit more so we can take a look at this. We're just going to quickly breeze through like a few pages of this. We're not going to do it too hardcore, but as long as we came this far. These few pages I'm going to show you are probably the best example of how you can just carry a book around with you and start drawing the stuff around you and see what happens. This book, I guess I will mention it really quick. It actually got ran over by a car. This is the sketchbook I had when I was in another part of Europe for a little while. I was in Ireland for a second. And I kept this with me the whole time. Also Italy a little bit. I kept it in both places. And one night I lost it. And I was like, I had been drinking a lot. That's how I was at that time. This was also like 10 years ago. Probably the same trip, actually. It actually definitely was the same trip. And I only went there once. And I was like, wow, I lost this. I literally can't believe I lost this. Like, I felt like I lost a piece of myself. And I was so upset. I wasn't really an internet or digital person at that time. So I was like, wow, I blew it. Like, I just lost a piece of my life because I was drinking too much. And I don't know where it is. And I went back to the bar and I was looking everywhere in the bar, like under tables, under chairs. I actually ended up sitting at the entrance of the bar. There was this chair and I sat in this big chair and I was like, wow, I literally can't believe it. I cannot believe I did that. And I fell asleep in the chair. And I woke up at like 4 a.m. Some guy was like, hey buddy, you got to get out of here. And I was trying to explain. I was like, look, I am drunk, but I'm not like that kind of drunk. I was looking for this book. Have you seen this book? And he was like, yeah, buddy, like get out of here. So I was walking home and I thought, again, wow, I really messed up. A serious document for me. And as I'm walking through the throughway, through the intersection, I looked down. And in this car's headlights, it was even raining a little bit, in this car's headlights was this book on the floor, having been run over by a bunch of cars. I guess it had been there for hours, so it's kind of a funny story. It has like a special place for me for that reason. So sometimes I would go and do like more legit sketches. This was a place in Italy, so I went and I was like, wow, that's cool. I'm going to try and like, feel out all the details here. And you can see this is like 10 years ago, so it's not as confident as my drawings now. If I did this now, it would be more confident, but that's where I was at the time. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Just kind of feeling stuff out, like, oh, what if I... And you can actually see, if we've come this far in the episode, you probably like my art a little bit. You can see that this is kind of still like my art now, but it's very like cluttery. It's very like not clear. You can see certain elements, but it's not as clear, basically, and that's something I developed over time. Anyway, though, okay, let's do it this way. So I wanted to look through these few pages here because I think this is one of the best examples of you can walk around and just draw stuff around you. So I was in Dublin and there were these angel sculptures and I was trying to capture those and the architecture. It really speaks for itself. I don't really have to talk too much. Went to the Guinness Museum. It's like, oh, that's cool. That's interesting. That's another aspect of it. You can kind of pick up visual details from art around you. But I also just went to bars and I would just hang out and just draw people and stuff. I would draw, here's this cup, here's this bottle, here's this guy. This is a really good example of shadow shapes. Something we'll cover a little bit later, but I kind of just want to get through this and wrap it up. You can see here, just like, oh, this street lamp is cool. The way this girl's sitting is cool. The way the light is on this guy's face is cool. The way this like beggar or someone, his lighting is cool. And just kind of just picking that up all the time. Here's this girl sitting. Maybe I'll use that for a picture later. Architecture, just feeling out the vibe, man. Like I said, it kind of speaks for itself, but I thought we should just quickly cover it. Again, picking up little visual details, the architecture. Nice, I really like this. This kind of zone over here, this guy's cool. And yeah, man, I literally just went to bars and just picked this stuff up. Just birds, there were these little weird little birds in Dublin. This building's really sweet. Really like this a lot. Oh, this is cool. The way it like comes over the edge here. You also get to a point of like you can notice, what visually appeals to you. Just more random stuff I was seeing. This girl's kind of cool the way she's drawn. I don't know what that was. I don't think that was a real person. It must have been like from some picture or something. And then I would just hang out in bars and just draw people. Old guy, Guinness. There's a band playing music and stuff. This page is probably the best example of how hard I took it at the time. It's pretty good, man. You also get a sense of making things more clear. Like here, this guy is like talking about soccer or something, and the bubble is like kind of removed from the page, but not really. Using the black of the beer as like the dark spots. So yeah, not that it's like some like incredible, like hyper amazing work of art, but I think it's a good example of where you can get to, and just by practicing and drawing the stuff around you. This page is really good too. Like this guy, he's like standing out. You learn how to kind of make things stand out. And yeah, I wanted to show you guys this just because I thought like a visual transmission maybe. Like I said, you can go to Walmart, you can pick up a book for $5-6. You can start drawing the things around you. You can get really good at it. I think we'll end on this note. This is perfect. I really like this drawing. And actually, this is another perfect example because I did take this drawing and I did make a picture of it later. I did like kind of a painting where this was like totally black and the sky behind it. But no matter where you are, maybe you live in the suburbs, rural area. There's stuff around you that's interesting to draw. So that would be that's kind of what I guess wanted to impart to you for this episode. We'll hit maybe next week, maybe just down the road, more like, technical instruction, like, well, actually, this is called hatching. This is called cross hatching. Here's how you use dots. Here's how you can, but really, honestly, if you just get a sketchbook, like I said, they have them at Walmart for like $5, even any size, but not too small. Don't get one that's too small. And a pen, what is this pen, like 50 cents or something? You can be set up, and honestly, you can go from that and just seeing stuff around you and drawing. You can go really, 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 really far. Maybe it's just 5 minutes a day. Maybe you ride the bus. That's awesome. Maybe you don't ride the bus. Maybe you have 5 minutes before bed and you just draw stuff in your bedroom. It could be literally anything. Stuff in your kitchen. Maybe there's an apple in your kitchen. You draw the apple every now and then. You can really impress yourself and take yourself really, 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 really far. So, like I said, since part of the show is about imparting that kind of creative aspect, anyone can do it, just go for it. I thought that it would be worth our time to hit, like I said, the lowest barrier of entry. And if you do it, hit me up. Show me what you're working on. That's kind of cool. But I've gotten a ton out of this part of my life, just looking at stuff around me and drawing it, even if I wasn't like an artist, doing it as my vocation. It really has changed the way I see things permanently. I mean, especially the shadow shapes and stuff you can see. When I'm drawing like that a lot, I literally see it around me. Like a girl will come to hand me something, and I'll see the shadow shapes of her neck and her face and her hand. Or when I'm drawing in a different way, I'll notice other things. Maybe I'm focusing more on the form and lines. I'll literally be seeing the stuff around me differently. So it could go on about it. We'll pick up this thread a little bit later, but it's time. It's time for me to hustle Owen Jr. to the closest city-state, so I'm going to do that. And thanks for coming through to hang out. You can also order a sketchbook online if you don't live near an art store, but they do have them at Walmart, just to say for the 10th time. So next time you're there, you're going to think, if you live in a place with Walmart, Owen really said it was only be like $5 or $6, maybe like $10 even, and maybe I should do it. Maybe I can do it. Maybe I can do it. And you can. So thanks for coming through to this atypical episode. You know the story. I'll catch you guys next week. Have a good evening and rest of your night.